You're listening to East Meets West Pakistani Professional Journeys podcast. Welcome to the East Meets West Pakistani Professional Journeys podcast. Today, our guest is Adil Mian, who has a bachelor's degree in computer science with a software engineering option from the University of Waterloo. He's worked at several co-op and jobs as a software developer in companies like Oracle, 360 Insights, Splunk, and D2L, which abbreviated Desire to Learn. And he's currently working as a software engineer at Microsoft. Before we get into like the professional aspect, I think so we'll just focus on the journey to Pakistan. So starting off, like in terms of your relation to Pakistan, like were you raised in Pakistan or were you raised in actually Canada? And do you mind just talking about that a little bit?
Sure, yeah. So most of my upbringing was in Pakistan. Like I was born in Pakistan, and for most of my schooling, I was there. We did tend to move around quite a bit. So there was like a few years in Saudi Arabia. There were a couple of years, slightly over a couple of years in Singapore, but most of it was in Pakistan. And I was born in Lahore, and then we've said my family belongs to Multan, so that's where I was kind of brought up.
Yeah. And did you find it easy in terms of the transitions either in Saudi Arabia and Canada, or how did you find it overall?
hmm Yeah, so the transition to Canada, it wasn't bad for me. Like I didn't get homesick. I was kind of lucky that way.
Okay.
I think it came down to the fact that we moved around quite a bit. So I was sort of kind of knew what to expect when you're moving countries and you're moving to entirely different places.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like too bad. There's obviously it's very different to move to Saudi Arabia when you're a little kid versus Canada when you're going there for uni, but it's it wasn't a shock for me.
Okay, that's good. And were there any like initial struggles that you faced in university, like coming straight from, getting into university? Like either, I guess, like I know some people mention like the visas and all that stuff. Like I'm
hmm
not sure if you faced any issues with that or.
Oh yeah, so there weren't any issues as far as like visas go, but I remember like
Okay.
at the time when I was applying for or I had to get my study permit, everything was processed. Like in Pakistan, everything takes longer, especially
Yeah.
when you're trying to like go outside of Pakistan.
Hmm.
And it was the same case for me. Everything was taking a while, but after everything was processed, I got the letter to send my passport in to get that little sticker. I remember when I sent that in, Imran Khan was doing something at a protest, and he locked
Mm.
down
Yeah.
I think it's called diplomatic something, enclave or whatever in
Right.
Islamabad. So I
Hmm.
had to wait a very long time for my passport to come back because it got to the embassy. They probably put the sticker on, but they had
Yeah.
no way to send it back. And I remember I landed in Canada a day before orientation started because
Oh
it
wow. Okay.
just came like last minute. And I was like all ready to defer my term, start in the winter instead of the fall. That was, I think, like the most anxiety-inducing experience because you're all like ready to go and you got to Waterloo, you're like feeling good and you just want to get started
Get
now.
started. Yeah.
Yeah, that was, I think, the only hurdle. Aside from that, and I guess like the hurdle itself was just waiting. But aside from that, everything was good. I was like pretty smooth as far as the process goes. It's just a lot of waiting in Pakistan.
Okay. And how did you? I guess were you able to adapt to the weather and whatnot quickly, or was that like a learning process on its own?
Yeah, I think so. Like the weather was pretty okay for me. I know
Okay.
that I kind of knew it was gonna get cold, and that's the one thing everyone tells you about Canada that the winters are gonna be
Yeah.
brutal and it's gonna be insane.
Yeah.
And I'm from Multan, which is relatively hotter than the other cities in Pakistan too.
Yeah.
So it was the idea in my head was this like scary winter that was gonna just turn me off from Canada entirely. But it wasn't too bad. I think the worst part of it was just the first time you slip and you fall, you
Yes.
have
Yeah.
to go through that trial, and
Yeah.
once you get over that, then it was pretty okay. Because I was pretty prepped for the winter too. I didn't try to challenge it or be like, no, I don't get cold. I
Yeah.
got all my stuff, and yeah, I was pretty well prepped, and it was fine honestly. Because like the wintertime, everyone kind of hunkers down in Canada.
Yeah.
I've noticed. So you don't like go out a lot to face the cold, so to say.
Yeah.
And the times that you do, you're pretty well bundled up. So it was good.
Got you.
It was okay.
Yep. And I guess switching to the education slash job. So how did you know you were interested in computer science? Was there like a class you took, teacher? Was there like a motivation behind it, or did you just like
Yeah,
go into it? Just
yeah. So like for me, it was always this is gonna sound like every other story, but it was always that kind of interest in computers, I suppose. I used to mess with my phone a lot. Back in like 2012 to 14,
yeah.
there were lots of guides online where you could install different kind versions of Android on your phone. And I remember messing with my phone that way quite a bit, like just install custom ROMs here and there. And at the time, that aftermarket community for Android was really, really hot. Lots of features that we have in Android now that are standard were written by some people in the aftermarket community. It wasn't a Google thing. Google just adopted those.
Right.
And so at the time it was really exciting and I used to do that all the time. I wasn't writing anything, but I remember there was this one moment when I installed ROM and I remember thinking that I want to be able to eventually get to a point in my life where I can write this. I don't want to install something. I want to write to something that people can install.
Yep.
And so I think that was the big moment that I switched because I was on track to become a doctor until like grade 10. I was going to
Yeah.
become a doctor because I come from a line of doctors.
Oh,
I
nice.
was going to be fourth to fifth generation. And
Yeah.
I was, so not that there was any pressure, but it was a sort of kind of implicit kind of expectation.
Yeah.
And but that moment, like it changed it. And so I was like, nope, I'm going to do software now. I had that romanticized idea of what software engineering was, but that was when it really solidified that I would like to chase that romanticized idea.
Yeah. So I guess the computer science courses in Pakistan, did you find them valuable, or was it a little bit more
So
um,
yeah,
on your own?
I can't comment on that because I didn't take any. My first line of
Oh,
code
okay.
was written
Well.
in university. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. So I guess you applied for computer science.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
On
That.
yeah, under like a pre-eng background because
Yeah.
in boxing you have to do the A levels
Yep.
and my
Yeah. For sure.
subjects were math, chemistry, and physics. So I guess like the math part came in really handy. The others like you don't really use in computer science, but that's the requirement, I suppose. You get a pretty good math background because computer science is very math heavy.
Got you.
Yeah.
And I guess it must have been challenging. Like, was it challenging to figure out like in university because you're completely from scratch? Like, you're probably with students that have like in Canada, grade
Yeah.
10, 11, you're already doing computer science, and you're just going in new. Like, it must have been really challenging.
Yeah, so I think like I met a bunch of people during orientation and it's very intimidating because
Yeah.
it seems like everyone has already written Facebook and then they're coming to university.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, well, I haven't done any like I don't even know where I would what I would do if I wanted to write code. Like where would I write it? How does one write code? It means nothing to me. So
Yeah.
it was like kind of intimidating at the start, but once you start doing it, they so Waterloo CS, I think most computer science programs they kind of assume that everyone's coming in with no programming experience at all. It's pretty
Okay, that's
fast
good.
paced. It's a very quick ramp up, but there is a ramp up from zero. So if you can keep up with it, you are in good shape. In some aspects, it's better to have no knowledge at all because there's some habits that university teaches you, especially when it comes to coding, that you don't really learn in high school, and so it's for a lot of people that had to like unlearn and learn new things, whereas I just had to learn the new thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not ideal to not have done any programming prior to, but it's you get by.
No, your story is very interesting because I'm not like, yeah, most of the people known or spoken to, they had like a understanding in grade 9, 10,
Right.
11. So like, how did you keep yourself organized? Like,
Mhm.
because it's completely new and
Yeah.
probably the stress, obviously, of, moving to a new country as well,
Mhm.
right? So how did you just, make sure you were finishing the work, learning and enjoying, well, partially
Yeah.
enjoying it. I wouldn't
Yeah.
say fully
Partially.
enjoying it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that the biggest part is to have a lot of discipline, and it helps not just in just learning how to program, but to like life in general.
Yeah.
But that's what like keeps you organized. You have to like time box a lot of things, and university. I remember like first year, well, like all of university was just really fast paced. If
Yeah.
you had to like juggle study and co-op all at the same time, and it was a lot. So you really had to make sure that you're setting time aside and you're dedicated to whatever you decided that you're going to set time aside for.
Gotcha.
I think that was the biggest help. And your professors, like they really are your friends. When they tell you to start early, start early. And it's no fun starting like a day or the night before it's due. And a lot
Yeah.
of people do that. I did that a bunch of times, but believe me, you are crying the next morning. You've spent the entire night. The next day is ruined for sure.
Yeah.
And it's not like you got your assignment done anyway. So yeah, starting early, just time boxing lots of things. Make sure you
Right.
have lots of self-discipline.
Yeah, and did you, on top of the courses, did you do anything externally that helped you, you felt, when you were initially learning, or was it
No,
just your
so
courses?
it was just courses. I
Okay,
remember
that's good.
the only time I did anything outside of coursework was at future times do some kind of side projects to get better co-ops. But remember, like first year I'm coming in, I don't even know what writing code means. So I wouldn't even know what to do externally, or what to like Google if I was to search for stuff to do on the side.
Okay, and I guess for the first few co-ops that you got, like how did you manage to get those roles? Like I'm assuming that computer science is extremely competitive. So
Hmm.
like did you network, or did you just, the grades were good enough and that was good?
Yeah, so the first part of your co-op, especially for someone like me who had no prior
Yeah.
experience, was to make sure that your grades are not horrible. It's not like you don't have to like be on the dean's list every term, but don't be failing and try to keep them somewhat important. And remember, grades are not important in the grand scheme of your life, but they're important to get you your first interview. If you look at it
Yeah.
that way and only focus on your grades for a little while, they do certainly help. So it was grades, it was knowing how to write a resume. Our resumes are so specifically tailored, and so there's such a specific format to them that
Yeah.
you have to be aware of it.
Yeah.
And so, like seeking that out, making sure your resume is really good, that definitely helps get your first interview. And then once you get to the interview, you have to like make an impression too. Make sure you're not lying on your resume. Don't be like lying during the interview. They will know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like it's interesting you brought that up because I even for finance and accounting, there's like an actual template. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, like if you meet this, they already know that okay, this person probably is like, investment
Yeah.
banking or whatnot, right? So I guess like for software engineering, it would be like a one pager, like resume you would
Yeah.
feel, or
Yeah,
okay,
for sure.
gotcha.
Like even in my career right now and so what I expect like after 10, 15 years, definitely not more than one page. And even that one page, it should not be like too wordy.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I think the first things, because I've critiqued a lot of resumes and a lot of people ask me for help on their resumes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if I see 2 pages, that's like the first thing you tell them to like cut out. No one wants to hear about it. Like no one wants to see a picture. Like that's taking way too much space on
Yeah.
the first page.
Right.
Yeah.
And I guess like once you completed your co-op terms, you graduated, and then you went into your full-time role, which is at
Hmm.
Splunk. Like how?
It was at D12. Splunk was the
Oh,
last
sorry.
co-op.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Desire to learn. Yeah.
Hmm.
And how did you manage to get that role?
D12 was I had interviewed for them a bunch of times when I was looking for co-ops, and I remember I got an offer for them during one of the terms that I didn't end up taking, but I reached out to the same people essentially after my study term, like after my last term was done, and I was going to graduate. And I was like, "Hi, you guys remember me?" And they're like, "Yeah, we do." And so I was like, "Okay, now I'm ready to take an offer if you still have it." And that was my process. Like this is where networking comes in so handy because even if you don't take a position or you fail the interview really horribly, make sure
Yep.
to always reach out to your interviewers. Make sure that they know you, even if it's just to say hi that one time on LinkedIn and you never talk to them again.
Yep.
It's always good to have some kind of impression that you left on them. This is what directly allowed me to get my full-time role. They
Right.
knew me already and they pushed me through some other rounds. I only had to do one round of interviews, which
Okay.
is
That's really good.
like pretty unheard of in software. But it's just because I had met with them before for co-ops and gotten an offer for co-op.
Yeah, I noted that at least with engineering or software engineering, it's quite competitive. Did you find it like in terms of like the social aspect with friends and whatnot, or
Mhm.
sorry, not friends, but colleagues in university? Were they helping? Was it really competitive? Uh, how was
Yeah,
that?
it is pretty competitive. Any person that you know within the org that you're trying to go into helps. Any if if your classmates are working there, that's fantastic. Ask for a referral. If you've worked with those people before in previous co-ops and now they're at an org that you want to go to, definitely reach out to them. If nothing else, if they can't refer you, which is pretty rare, they always can. But if they can't, the least they can do is give you advice on how to change a few words on your resume to
Yeah.
make sure that the recruiter will pick it up. So that's always, always, always helpful. And even if it's like people you haven't ever talked to in class or except for that one time,
Yeah.
and they're in that org, definitely reach out to them. It helps a lot because remember you're competing with everybody in the world
Right.
after
Yeah. That's
university.
yeah.
So any kind of little connection that you have into that org or that position, that definitely helps.
Okay. And I guess you leverage LinkedIn mostly, or is there like a special area you use for your industry in
Yeah,
terms of
no,
reaching?
it's LinkedIn. LinkedIn is
Okay. Yeah.
the standard. If it's not LinkedIn, then you privately know those people. It's just like texting here and there. But yeah, LinkedIn is definitely the standard for software. There's no
Okay.
other secret platform, or at least if there is, I don't know about it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
guess like after Desire to Learn, then you moved on. Like, how was your experience in like getting the next role? And
Mhm.
you might just walk me through that, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. So when I was a Desire to Learn, after a few months, I was like, I felt I was ready to grow into a new role, and I felt that my career goals or career growth wasn't, those needs weren't getting met a desire to learn, so I decided to switch out to a different company. And I applied to a bunch of companies. The process basically just it's pretty typical to getting any tech job. You have to take a bunch of time off to learn and study about the interview because the interviews also in software are pretty specific.
Yeah.
There's almost like a set standard, and I can talk about that as well. But you have to take some time off to study or like really sit down and study as if you're studying for finals. And once you feel like you're ready, then it's time to like make sure to get your resume critiqued a bunch of times, reach out to any people that are working in an org that you might wish to go to, ask for a referral if you can. Referrals are very they cost very little, but they help a lot because
Yeah.
they get you in most places they get your resumes at the top of the pile that the recruiter is going to look at, and they like recruiters have thousands and thousands, especially if you go into big tech, they have like a gazillion
Yeah.
resumes they're going to
Makes
look
sense.
at,
Yeah.
and so if yours at the top and they look at it, that gives you a lot of chance to just be passed on to the hiring manager and getting your interview done.
Yeah.
So yeah, like study, get your resume critiqued, ask for any referrals that you can, and that was like my process too.
Okay. And did you utilize like headhunters? I'm not sure if the software industry has the headhunters that you can reach out to, or was it just by yourself and the referrals from people you potentially know?
Yeah, so for me it was referrals, and a bunch
Okay.
of recruiters reached out to me too. It's just like the Waterloo gives you a little bit of an edge because you've done so many co-ops.
Yeah.
And in 2021, the market was really hot for software too. So companies were like sending out their recruiters to message people on LinkedIn, getting lots of talent in at the lower levels, at the junior level, so they can grow them to senior and keep them in the company. Coincidentally, I was really lucky to be looking for a new job in that time. So I didn't utilize any headhunters, no, but I was
Okay.
reached out to by a bunch of recruiters. Referrals was my big thing.
Okay. And just going back to, so you mentioned about the like actually getting the role and you taking a break and then actually studying for it. Like, do you
Hmm.
mind just walking through a little bit of that process?
Hmm.
Obviously, not
Yeah,
revealing too much about
yeah,
inside information, but like I think so, just
yeah.
like in general.
Yeah, there's not that much inside information actually,
Okay.
because the process is pretty similar across all tech jobs, especially if you got like less than I almost want to say 10 years of experience. If you don't have that and you're not looking for senior roles, this looks similar for every all tech people. If you're going to software engineering, you'll probably have to do learn or relearn algorithms and data structures. Again, there's lead code style questions. Every software person knows lead code, and I think every software person hates it too. I
Okay.
definitely hate it because these are these kind of questions that you'll be asked to solve using code and write algorithms to solve whatever problem you're given. You need to like learn and practice those questions. And there's like tons and tons of resources online on how to ace your tech interview, and all of them boil down to making sure that your fundamentals, your computer science fundamentals, are properly learned and revised,
Yeah.
and you've practiced these bunch of problems.
Right.
So that's like the one big thing you need to do.
Okay. And you mentioned, sorry, was it lead code or?
Yeah, lead code. Yeah.
Okay. Is that like a site, or I guess it's just like a general
Mhm.
description of? Okay.
It did start as a site where people used to go and solve algorithm questions for fun, but it's been like the questions on there are used as questions in interviews for you to solve. They're pretty standardy, puzzly kind of questions that you need to solve, and they test a bunch of algorithms and data structures. But it's a very lead code is very standard across software. The fact that we can say lead code style questions and everyone can just kind of understands what you mean
Okay.
speaks for itself. But it's very standard across tech.
Okay. Yeah, I know like the at least from when I heard the interviews are very technical, like in
Yeah,
terms of the
yeah,
so you got to know what you're doing so
yeah.
unless you want to get the job. But
There's
it must be kind of like challenging because like if you're applying to roles and then you spend so much time and you don't get the role,
mhm.
then like what's your thoughts on that? Like how do people just like bounce back, keep going?
It's difficult. I'm not gonna lie because it's not even that you're gonna be done a round of interview and that's it. They're gonna decide yes or no. You go through multiple rounds and
Yeah.
they only get tougher. You have to. There's that initial like usually how it works is there's like an initial phone screen. They're gonna ask you some basic questions to make sure that you know what it means to write code. And then there's those screener kind of interviews after that where they're going to pair you with someone. They're going to ask you like a couple lead code style questions, dig into your resume maybe a little bit. But most of the interviews like focus on lead code. And there's a lot of pressure on you because you have to get it right the first time. You have very little time to fix it if you got something wrong. And it's very easy to get something wrong. It might be like a +1 that you missed in this
Yeah.
giant file.
Oh
And
man.
it's really hard to find it in that moment because
Yep.
you have that 1 hour. You need to find that +1. And if you don't get through the lead code part, you're definitely not getting through to the next round. It's very rare that your solution is like wrong, but the concept is there and you get through to the next round. That's where like it's very disheartening if you go through all this practice and you
Yeah.
get to the on-sites, which is like 4 or 5 hours worth of interviews with different people, and then you get rejected, which is it's very common because big tech, even though they hire so many people, it's a very low number of people that actually
Yeah.
make it all throughout the rounds. You have to make sure that you're not burning out. For me, like my process, or like I remember like thinking that, okay, I took this 2 weeks worth of vacation from D2L. This was like for my last year that
Yeah.
wasn't gonna roll over. And I studied and I'm doing like lead code after work every single day. This is not sustainable. I don't like, I would rather be playing video games instead. So if I'm gonna try for a month and I'm gonna try really hard for a month, if I
Yep.
don't get a job within a month, and if I get rejected from every position I'm applying to, or don't get something that I actually want to take, I will take a break. Like I will stop lead coding and we will take a little break for the sake of my mental health.
Yep.
Take 2 or 3 months, relax. Don't be doing like lead code. Don't be burning yourself out. And then let's try again. And I
Right.
had friends who went through similar processes where they tried for a few weeks, it didn't quite work out, and then took a break and then come back and then they got the position. Because you can't like it's not sustainable to be learning lead because it is like
Yeah.
doing a
Man.
course on your own. You
Yeah.
can't like do that after like a work day sustainably for a long period of time. At least I can't. Like I
Yeah.
knew a month or a month and a half, maybe that's my limit.
Right. I guess it's also kind of nerve wracking. Like, like I guess there's like new problems, like things you need to solve every single time. So I guess that adds to the complexity of like the
Yeah.
interview process, as well as just like being up to date with your field, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
no, for sure. And it's not like those questions are going to be solved in 10 minutes.
yeah.
Everything, if you like
Mhm.
properly sit down to do a problem as if it was going to be presented to you in an interview, that's 30, 40 minutes gone. And it's also a lot of brain power that you're using. You get mentally pretty exhausted after, like I used to get pretty exhausted after, if I was there for like an hour or 2 hours, that's it, that's my limit. So I would
Yeah.
only be solving like 2 or 3 questions a day, which also
Gotcha.
like means like you really got to pick like proper 2 or 3
Good
questions to
ones. Yeah.
practice. Yeah.
So how was your day to day in Microsoft, or at least where you're working right now? Like, how are you finding it? And yeah, how's the week or months
Yeah.
like in terms of work?
Oh, yeah, it's really great here. I've kind of lucked out in the org that I've gotten into in Microsoft. So my days are it's very good with time management, I suppose. So day to day mostly looks like in the mornings, I start at 11 o'clock because I work Pacific time hours. So it's going to be
Okay.
11 for me in Toronto, but it's going to be like 8 or 7, I forget whatever the time is, in Vancouver and on the West Coast where most of my team is.
Yeah.
So I start my day 11, which makes like I got the morning off, which I like because I like to have a slow start to the day. I can go to the gym and whatnot. But yeah, like you start the mornings. Most of your meetings are in the mornings in the West Coast. So meetings mostly until 1 or 2 o'clock our time, and you're reading emails, catching up on what you've done on the day before, kind of planning your day. And the real coding just happens after lunch, which for me is like 3 to 4 is like that lunch hour because it's 12 to 1 there.
Yep.
And after 4 o'clock, there's usually no more meetings. You put your headphones on, you pick your favorite album, and you're basically just coding away or writing some kind of doc to present the next day.
Yeah.
That's the day to day.
Got you. And I guess you develop the skills where you're more efficient in terms of just like getting the
Yeah.
work done on a really like efficient time. I
Mhm.
guess like, are you constantly like trying new things, or is it just like, you're just doing work, and I think so that's enough in terms of
Yeah.
learning all the new.
Yeah. So for myself, right now in the position that I'm in my career right
Yeah.
now, I would like to have a very high growth trajectory at the moment so that I can like relax by the time I'm like, I don't know, like
Yeah.
maybe 35 and then just like chill until my retirement. Like, that is the point when you can almost go on cruise control. But right now it is, I would like to be on high growth. The way that I go about it is, I think, slightly atypical because I'm not learning on the side after work. I'm not doing any kind of worky or software thing after work. I would like to relax and just like
Yeah.
partake in my hobbies. But the way that I keep myself growing and make sure that I'm on this growth trajectory is to slowly expand my scope at work every so often. So at Microsoft, we work in quarters because like big tech, that's how they work.
Yeah.
And every quarter or every like half quarter, you want to make sure that your scope is slightly expanded so that you're ever so slightly uncomfortable. If
Yeah.
I'm like ever so slightly uncomfortable at the start of every quarter when we're planning and I'm like slightly, ever so slightly nervous about how this is going to get done, or I'm not sure of how it's going to get done, that means that I'm in a good place. And it's been like that. It's been like successful so far. So
Gotcha.
just keep expanding the scope of your work. It works beautifully here. It worked really great at D12 and even co-ops, which are really, really short.
Yeah.
But like every month, try to make sure that you're trying something slightly more than what you did before.
Got you. And for like organizing your time, like in terms of, making sure, you're turned off from work,
Mhm.
do you have like something that you try doing just to make sure there's that separation between life and work?
Oh yeah. So for me, because I know that a very popular piece of advice is to make sure that your work is in a different place as
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
like where you relax. I don't have that luxury. It's like a pretty small, tiny Toronto apartment. But
Yeah.
what I like to do is I've got this like setup here that I'm using right now with my work computer. I'm gonna switch out the dock to my personal computer, and that means it's officially the off of work time. And that just the fact that I've taken my work laptop off the dock and plugged my own in, that really separates work life for me. Whenever work's done, just unplug your work computer and just have it sit on the side where it's like a little uncomfortable to reach and get. So I like to put a bunch of things on top. So at the very least, I need to like move those things around.
Yeah.
That also like helps me to say that no, that we are not
Stop.
in work time right now. Yeah.
Yeah. And do you have any advice for an individual that actually might be interested in breaking into like the large tech firms, like just like general advice or anything that can
Yeah.
you think help them?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, there's lots of efficient ways to go about lead code because I hated lead code and I would not want to be that person that has practiced like 200 or 300. Like people do that.
Wow.
And so my advice is just to make sure that when you're learning to do lead code, because it's such a big part of your interview, make sure to Google or learn about the patterns that are in lead code questions as opposed to the questions themselves.
Yeah.
If you can do like a couple of questions from a pattern and learn the pattern that way, you don't need to do seven others that are of the same pattern. And it saves you a lot of time because lead code was mentally draining for me.
Yeah.
And so that's like the one piece of advice. Make sure to definitely learn the patterns. I did not end up doing more than 70 questions. And even out of the 70, like 30 or 35 of them were those easy questions that take like 5 minutes a piece.
Okay.
It's really like practice. Can you write code kind of questions, like not the ones that take 30 minutes or so. So I didn't do like any more than 70.
Gotcha.
So make sure to recognize those patterns and then get your resume critiqued by as many people as you can. I feel like resumes are really, really important in getting you through to the interview. Remember, the entire point of a resume is to just get you that first interview. So make sure that like you're using proper words and make sure to send it to a bunch of people that can properly take some time to critique it. That's really, really helpful.
Got you. And how would you at least define success in your terms?
Mhm.
Like, do you have like a mantra or something that you follow, or is it do you have something that pushes you forward?
Yeah, there's always that aspect of growing. Right now, my big career goal is to get to a point in life where I can architect an app from scratch. And I'm slowly getting there because it's easy to write small apps, but apps that enterprises write, like you might think something like, I don't know, like Facebook. Well, Facebook's pretty complicated, but even something simple like a to-do app that Microsoft or Google
Yeah.
writes, they have to write an app that has to be equally as fast and performant and correct for millions and millions of people. So I want to get to a point where I am sure that I can do that and get
Right.
to that. Usually translates to getting to the architect level or the principal level and like having that in your title at most big tech or like tech in general. So that's what my big goal is, but also I'm not rushing towards that, that I'm not burning out and like I'm aware of that. So that goal is my North Star, and I'm like aware of the little steps I'm taking along the way. And if I can like measure my progress from last quarter and just keep myself ever so slightly uncomfortable. Ever so slightly though, like I don't like to be
Yeah.
too uncomfortable,
Yeah. That's right.
but ever so slightly uncomfortable. If I'm feeling that way, that means I'm growing and getting to my North Star.
Okay. And when did you know that you were interested in like developing like an app or whatnot?
Mm-hmm.
Like, was it in university or was it like as you worked, you realized, okay, this is something I want to do long term?
Oh yeah, so like writing Android apps specifically, or I knew I wanted to work on mobile because I used to mess with my phone way
Yeah.
back like
Gotcha.
in high
Yeah.
school, before high
Hmm.
school. So I knew I wanted to write apps. That was like definitely a thing I knew I wanted to do then. At the time, I had obviously a romanticized idea of what it would mean to write apps. Like I didn't know what it meant to write apps, but I just
Yeah.
like the idea of it. And throughout my co-ops, I didn't quite get a chance until my last one at Splunk. And when I did that, it made me really happy to see writing something that you can see on your screen, you can interact with. So I love like writing front end systems. You might not like or like appreciate when like you press a button and confetti goes everywhere. But I love that. Like
Yeah.
it's fantastic when if I can get to write something where you press like a like icon and it like wiggles a little bit before
Yeah.
it settles down. That was always something I wanted to do, and now having done it for a few years because my Splunk co-op was working in Android. D2L I worked on an Android app. The only reason I took a job was because I wanted them to confirm that I'll be working in mobile. And then like right now, Microsoft, I write Android apps. Like having done it for a while, I'm pretty set that this
Something.
is very similar to the idea that I had of writing apps. And so I kind of like wanted to do it. And then when I did it, I'm like, I definitely like it. Like
Yeah.
more confetti buttons everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I guess was there any like groups you joined throughout the entire process that helped you, or was it just you solo did it and you worked from there, and then also going through the sites and whatnot?
Yeah, no groups in particular, but you always have
Okay.
this like kind of cohort in university. So always like leverage them. They might not get you to an Android position, but they have lots of tips to make sure that you get a position in tech. And from there, early in your career, like for the first 2 years, the skills that you're developing, it's almost not worth to specialize that early. Like I've specialized that early. Like I'm mobile is a specialization, but it's kind of like I always wanted to do it. And I kind of fell into it, and it was really good. I really liked it, so I'm choosing to stay in it. But the skills that you build, even in mobile, a lot of them are just general software skills that are going to get you into they're going to be helpful in any kind of specialization that you need to
Yep.
do. So I didn't like, because of that, I didn't worry about looking out for groups. So aside from just the people you go to school with, just make sure to get your resume critiqued a bunch of times and
Yeah.
make sure that you're prepping the right way and learning if there's something that everyone's talking about and everyone's wanting to learn, that thing is more likely than not pretty helpful, and you should look into it.
Got you. And I guess like ending off the last question, is there like a favorite moment you had during either your work terms, your co-op terms, in Pakistan? Kind of like, was there a specific, moment that really drove you forward and pushed you?
Yeah, I think like a lot of the work that I've done here at Microsoft has been really it has made me feel really accomplished because even the changes that I was making at D2L, because like, I always want to write Android apps,
Yeah.
and changes that you make or stuff that you write at Splunk or D2L is obviously smaller scope. But at Microsoft here, I'm very lucky in the team that I'm in and in the org that I'm in, and the fact that like I have a fantastic manager. Like everything's just I've lucked out into so many things.
Yeah.
Like it really is a big privilege for me. But I get that opportunity and to see it work and to see it work in the hands of so many people. And that is very motivating when you see
Yeah.
make the changes that are very visible. I made some changes that show up on almost every single screen of the app. And it's pretty
Nice. Yeah.
substantial. Like people have to use them. And
Right.
I remember like it was terrifying when it finally like rolled out to bigger and bigger groups of people to use.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, I really hope I didn't break anything. And it was so terrifying. And I was like
Yeah.
so careful, but still you're so nervous. And to see it work and to see like work consistently, and then people say, well, like, this is a good change. I like this.
Yeah.
And I like this new way of doing things. That's very fulfilling for me right now. And because I also like keep myself ever so slightly uncomfortable, when you see the work that you've done come to fruition and knowing that you were a little uncomfortable and you had a little bit of uncertainty when you were starting it, you can like see how far you've come along, even if it's as short as like a month and a half.
Right.
That is very fulfilling for me, and it happens like over and over, and I still haven't gotten bored of it. We'll see if it ever like runs out and I have to like find more motivation somewhere. But
Yeah.
right now, that's what keeps me going. Like
Right.
I get to like see and interact with my work.
Awesome. Bill, like, thanks a lot for your time. Like, that was a really like great discussion, as well as just natural.
No
So yeah,
problem.
thank you so much.
No problem. Happy to be here.